στην συνεδρία με θέμα κλιματικές και περιβαλλοντικές προκλήσεις και κίνδυνοι, όπου έχουμε την τιμή να έχουμε ένα εκλεκτό πάνελ, τον κύριο Καραμάνο, ακαδημαϊκό και καθηγητή μας για χρόνια, τον κύριο Ανδρέα Λykourentzos, πρόεδρο του ΕΛΓΑ, τον κύριο Γιάννη Καντόρο από την Interamerican SA Διευθύνοντα Σύμβουλο και τον κύριο Ιωάννη Tzortzis από την RAEEY τώρα, τη Ρυθμιστική Αρχή Αποβλήτων Ενέργειας και Υδάτων, οπότε έχετε όλο το φάσμα της συνεδρίας. Οι κλιματικές και περιβαλλοντικές προκλήσεις, όπως θα διαπιστώσατε όσοι παρακολουθήσατε και τις προηγούμενες συνεδρίες, συνεχώς έβγαιναν μέσα από τις συζητήσεις σαν ένας παράγοντας ο οποίος στο μέλλον θα ρυθμίσει και θα καθορίσει πολλές από τις εξελίξεις, πάρα πολλές από τις ευκαιρίες που θα έχει ο αγροτικός τομέας, καθώς και από τις προκλήσεις που θα κληθούμε όλοι να αντιμετωπίσουμε, είτε αυτές είναι αρνητικές είτε είναι θετικές, γιατί η κλιματική αλλαγή θα παρουσιάσει και πάρα πολλές θετικές προκλήσεις για μας που θα σχεδιάσουμε και θα εφαρμόσουμε αγροτική πολιτική. Σε αυτό το περιβάλλον καλούμαστε σήμερα να συζητήσουμε τους τρόπους με τους οποίους η αγροτική πολιτική και ο αγροτικός τομέας θα μπορέσει να ανταποκριθεί στις προκλήσεις για το μετριασμό των επιπτώσεων από την κλιματική αλλαγή, αλλά και στο μετριασμό του βαθμού με τον οποίο προχωράει γρήγορα η κλιματική αλλαγή και επίσης τις ευκαιρίες τις οποίες έχουμε για προσαρμογή στην κλιματική αλλαγή, και αυτός είναι ο λόγος για τον οποίο σε αυτό το πάνελ υπάρχουν άνθρωποι οι οποίοι θα μας μιλήσουν και για την προσαρμογή μέσα από την πίστη και την ασφάλεια, ακαδημαϊκοί οι οποίοι θα μας πούν τις ευκαιρίες που ανοίγονται μπροστά μας για την προσαρμογή και για το μετριασμό της κλιματικής αλλαγής, και φυσικά για την ενέργεια και για τις κλιματικές και όχι μόνο και για τις, περιβαλλοντικές και όχι μόνο στενά κλιματικές προκλήσεις που αντιμετωπίζει η γεωργία. Οπότε θα ήθελα να δώσω κατευθείαν το λόγο στον συνάδελφο, συν-moderator, τον πρέσβη κύριο Χριστίδη, ο οποίος θα ξεκινήσει και τον πρώτο κύκλο των ερωτήσεων.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Βεβαίως θα αναρωτηθείτε τι κάνει ένας αφιπηρετής σας Έλληνας πρέσβης σε ένα τέτοιο εξαιρετικά εξειδικευμένο πάνελ με ανθρώπους ειδικούς και εμπειρογνώμονες ο καθένας στον τομέα του. Είμαι εδώ για δύο λόγους. Πρώτον, γιατί είναι εξαιρετικά δύσκολο.
I'm here for two reasons. First of all, because it is very difficult to face Mr. Dalakakis, and secondly, because I have to admit that this surrounding is not unknown to me. The surrounding of agriculture and its future. I have a rural past. My first 70 years, I was in the Institute Dandakos, and I was attended at the previous panel. But let's go back to the climate crisis and the downgrowth of the environment. And I want to point out the very special point that everyone referred to, and is it is absolutely rational because it's not a factor, only one factor that we are going to face in the future. It is there are multiple factors that highly consider the agricultural sector. And it is the very special moment that we're going to discuss these topics among the specialists. Today finishes in Baku the conference of COP29. We don't know if this will be the very grand result of this conference, and that all the participants of this COP will participate in financial plan, which is very important. For others, it is not. If countries such as China participate in, and among any doubt of the results, it is very crucial, this conference, this meeting, and very of the time, because we are waiting for the final structure and, of course, the authorization of the new U.S. government, a very well-known president of our, not very gentle as far as the climate crisis is concerned and how we can face these climate changes. On the other hand, his support to the oil producers is very well known. So, in the threshold of all these doubts and the cruciality of the problem, I am more than happy that we have great speakers that are going to give us a very clear image of where we stand and what we can hope for. So the very first question, Mr. Chairman, all of us, we are chairmans, is how do you think that we are going to make an international policy, global policy, able to face the problem, to fight against the problem? Because there are two parts. On the one hand, there are those who say that the disaster is pretty near and that the environmental disaster, that all the phenomena of climate crisis, that more and more often, and the weather extremes are very close to us. And on the other hand, there are scientists, to be honest, that support that all these things are circular phenomena that have already existed in the past, and there is no problem. What is the truth, where we stand, and what are we able to understand? Thank you very much, Mr. Christides. Look, I don't think that we have to spend much time on the topic if there is or not climate crisis. Of course, if the phenomenon were able to, if circular phenomena were to blame for this climate crisis was true, then this will be very obvious at the climate parameters. So, if we take into consideration one parameter, which is the atmospheric temperature from 1980, and then there is a continuous increase. If it was a circular convention, then the temperature should have decreased and then increased again. So the problem is up to the greenhouse effects, which increases the temperature of the environment. So this is, I have an opinion as far as the scientific legitimacy of the people who support this kind of things. Even today's session is just a hope, let's say. We miss the practical dimension of this. Even China and other big forces, bigger countries, don't adopt. Greece, a small power, let's say, is unable to do something big, to less. So what I propose is to let ourselves focus on the Greek reality and do whatever we can with our own measures. So let me make a more
σχέδιο εθνικής στρατηγικής για τον αγροτικό τομέα. Αυτό υπευλήθη.
Let me point out the national strategy. So this in October 2022 was adopted. The first thing I have to say is that this national strategy does not give the adaptation, the exploitation of risk management tools. This is at the first and the second pillar of the COP. But the first thing we experience, all of us, is the climate change. So the first thing that comes in mind is the risk management tools. Although there might be other reasons like hygiene crisis and geopolitical crisis, the first thing that comes is the climate changes. So there are data that comes from the report of the HBO that, among any doubt, the agricultural sector is the sector which is going to be affected by the climate changes. The annual decrease of the GDP will be 0.72 to 0.97 annually up until 2050 and be doubled, which means 2.03 to 2.012 at 2100. So, any authority can't pretend, any ministry can pretend that has no knowledge of the risks and that has no knowledge of this phenomenon. Second, in the AgriBusiness Forum of the last year, I presented some policies for the adaptation to the climate change, which are based to the national strategy for the adaptation to the climate change, which became a law of 2016 and has a lot of measures and actions. So what I tried to do was to make some policies, rural plan for the floodings, conservation and increase of the water systems. These are projects which actually require high subsidies.
θα έπρεπε ήδη να έχει δρομολογηθεί.
These projects for its catchment should have already been planned.
Παρουσίασε ένα ολοκληρωμένο σχέδιο, το οποίο όμως ξεκίνησε.
We know that there is a concrete plan which actually began after Daniel, which means that we follow the evolutions, we follow the disasters, we are not a step forward.
Είναι ο αγαπητός φίλος, πρώην υπουργός, ο κ. Λykourentzos, ο οποίος θα μας μιλήσει για τα προβλήματα που αντιμετωπίζει ο ΕΛΓΑ.
So, Mr. Lykourentzos is here and he's going to talk to us about the problems that ELGA faces. So I'm not going to say a lot of things. So we have to find alternative solutions for the guarantee of the agricultural income. And last but not least, I want to add the training and educational strategies of the farmers. Don't forget that the farmers are the main users of all these. So we have to train and educate them properly. So who is going to undertake this? We have a shortcoming. From 2022, we have asked for the AKIS. I'm so sorry. We have asked for a national policy, but the system AKIS, which is approved, is still not functional. I don't want to spend your time. What I would like to say is that this is not a criticism against the national strategy. There are reports, there are publications, but I just want to point out the topics and the points of the problem, which is actually a real problem of the Mediterranean area. According to my point of view, so there is a long gap among what we say and the policy for the adaptation to the climate change. To me, the academic who actually needs that some measures and actions should be made should collaborate with the authorities, the sectors, not only in public but also in regional sector. Do you ask if I'm optimistic or pessimistic? It seems that hope is the last we have, but we still have a long way to save the situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karamanos. When asked that given the scale of this country in the European Union and given the power of the European Union globally on the climate, given that the US are probably going to get out of any agreement, is there any point in going after mitigation? Or should we have long ago been putting into practice or being focusing more into adapting? And when we talk about adaptation, we talk about three separate things. First of all, the possibility at the moment something happens, whether extreme destruction happens, for the system to bounce back immediately. But at the same time, it's also our possibility to plan a system with a gradual adaptation to the new environment, which on the long run will look to be transformed into a different system. So we're talking about transformation and adaptation. So we have an immediate resilience, then adaptation, and then resilience again of a different type. For the first response, though, it's very important to remember the role of security. It's very important, the role of the insurance organization. So I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Lykourentzos right away, and to you, Mr. Kantoros, and tell us, from the point of view of insurances and from the private sector point of view, what is happening. Let's go into insurances first, and then let's go into adaptation of in the energy field, and how we can aid the adaptation work through the new policies for energy. Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. I will start by making some general remarks. As has already been said, we live under the risk of an ever-augmented and increasing climate crisis. Our participation, given the participation of the young people here, our time needs more diplomacy and less fighting, and that's where we should steer our efforts, and that's where humanity should go as a whole. Secondly, we need to exploit technologies not to only go forward with the military technologies and the space technologies, but also for technologies that can offer humanity the tools to mitigate the intensity of the climate crisis. When I was younger, if I were younger, I would see everything in a different way. But now I see it carrying so many dangers that I'm afraid that humanity does not have the mechanisms to fight back. We mentioned COP29 and the decisions. Regardless of who is going to participate in that meeting and in that final press release, and whether these decisions will be followed, what is the main deficiency of all these efforts are the executive mechanisms in place. We can all wish for the best, but who is going to carry out the work in the very next day? Who is going to implement all the works that we have planned for the mitigation, for the reduction of pollution? We see, for example, that in Athens there are polluted waters just a few miles outside of Attica. So we ourselves don't have the mechanisms to protect our own lives. Secondly, since you mentioned the cotton issue before, I need to remind the young people here the great success of the enlargement, of our integration into the European community with Mr. Karamanos. And at that time we had oil, tobacco and cotton dominating on our part in the European markets. It was a great battle at the time because we did not have the subsidies that we have today. It was a great battle from the actors of the time to achieve favorable terms for Greece at the time. And also I need to remind you of our integration of us joining the monetary community as well, because if it weren't for that, we would not be able to talk about Greece and playing on the same level as the rest of the European countries, being equal with other European countries. So, in that aspect, let's go into the agricultural insurances. Before we talk about that, we need to talk about the agricultural households, fields, and the places where agricultural economy is developed and contributes to the GDP. We have incomes for these households, and therefore we ensure the socioeconomic fabric. in that area. So the mechanism for agro-insurances in the organism I preside over for the last 5 years aims at protecting agricultural crops from specific dangers, not from everything, with a specific insurance fee of 1.5% of the estimated, of the calculated really, value of production that will be rendered by the cultivation annually, to a 4% of calculated value of the production. So let me just give you 3 numbers only. It concerns 661,000 farmers that are members of the organism who declare their membership, their participation through OPEKP, and most of these farmers, 80% specifically, have given the right to ELGA to collect the contributions that should be given to them in their name, so they don't have to take on that responsibility. The income for the declarations of 2024 at the time is approximately 202 million euros. The insured value of securized production is 8.5 billion euros. So subtract 15% of the 200 approximately million euros that are insured. And let me also stress that in the past 5 years, we spent on compensations 1.5 billion euros. How was that possible, you might ask? How can you pay that if you get as an income roughly half of it? Today's government of Mr. Mitsotakis provided with the outburst of Yiannis weather conditions, non-unpaid debts from the past 10 years amounting to 30 million euros. Because we can't get finances from the special insurance fee that farmers pay and allocate them elsewhere, for instance, in airplanes for the agriculture, in drones for the agriculture. In 2020, because we didn't have money to pay compensations after Yiannis, and let me not go into too much detail and not get too political, you might ask, how did you manage to get money to do that? We submitted twice to the European Commission a program amounting to 310 million euro. And so let me build on Mr. Karamanos here. For that amount, for the 310 million, the European Commission only approved that. They did not cash that. We paid money on our own. We gave to the people some money, but then they asked, on previous occasions, they asked this money back. So we took that money that were paid by the Greek government in 3 installments in the organization, and we pushed that through the partnering banks, specifically Piraeus Bank, who used to be the agricultural bank connected to many farmers. So today we have paid 95% our debts to farmers for annual compensations. During my 5 years, the circumstances are getting direr and direr. The claims for compensations increase. Just this year, for Daniel and for compensations of 2023, we have paid 388 million, which is immeasurable given the the potential of an organization like ELGA, like the Greek Agricultural Insurance Organization. Besides the climate crisis, we have the attorneys of the websites, let's say, and the ministers of the coffee houses. Everyone has an opinion. Everything needs to be paid, but at the same time, our fees should not be augmented. Our fees should not be increased. We cannot solve this equation. It's impossible. But because agricultural insurances are of national importance, the ministers of agriculture over the years, we have developed in cooperation with the actors involved and the local government various mechanisms. We cannot very easily add another risk to the quite poor regulation that we already have, because we need to secure our resources. We cannot find resources easily. The producers need to pay, and the European Commission needs to allow the national governments to reinforce the local insurance organizations. And furthermore, we face another very serious problem, that the European Commission, as Mr. Karamanos rightly put it, has not yet acknowledged the need to manage the consequences of climate crisis. There is no European fund for that, and that's not just for Greece, it's for Valencia, for German cities as well. We don't have a strictly ruled, of course, fund that will regulate unsubstantiated claims, but we don't have a fund that will, in cases like that of Daniel, help local governments and national governments. Nor do we have a fund that will function with resources from the CAP, for instance. We don't have that mechanism, and we are in danger. And let me just give you a personal comment on all of that. That's just me speaking now. If we don't address that challenge in a timely manner, we are going to be where we were in 2002, when the crisis broke out, when our fiscal mechanism did not have the instruments to cope with such a crisis, and you saw what happened for the next 10 years, to end up having mechanisms now to address fiscal crisis, economical crisis, and at what cost, nonetheless. And so I'm afraid it's just my reasoning, but I think that if we don't have such a mechanism in a timely matter to finance compensations and essentially ensure socio-economic participation, it's going to be very bad. For instance, people tell me that they don't have money to pay for their rent. They don't have money to pay for their children going to study. So, the climate crisis is a great challenge, a great danger for socioeconomic fabric, for the national economy. So we need to have mechanisms in place with which every national government will be able to ensure this minimum level of security, and of course being in a position to rebuild the production itself. We did not pay, for instance, in Thessaly, only compensations for the damages, but also we pay for the compensations of new plant units to plant, again, trees, for instance. So, facing the uncertainties of the future, we need to prioritize the collectiveness, we need to prioritize the installation, the establishment of mechanisms. And let me just add that we need definitely put the maladies of the past behind us, and we need to face the future with precision and collectiveness. Thank you.
Ναι. Λοιπόν, καλησπέρα και από μένα. Εγώ να συνεχίσω
I want to build on Mr. Lykourentzos. We talked a lot about the livestock production and it's rational, but I want to widespread a little bit. What happened with Daniel when the private sector participated a lot, more or less 400 million euros. Interamerican that I represent more or less 70 million euros. It was about the transformation and instruments, trucks for the area, also residences, but it was a mess. It's not only the plants. The streets, the ports, the energy, the energy, the small industries, the small units of dairy production, the small units with local products. It's everything. It's also human lives. It's also our capacity, our possibility to provide hygiene aid. We sent private ambulances because the public sector couldn't face all these difficulties and people couldn't go to the hospital. For example, there was a day a man of 75 years old and he couldn't be transmitted to the hospital. So I cannot say that we didn't have the means, but we had Ioannis 2 years ago. Our contribution was about 7 million. We spent 10 millions. As far as what we have to do, what we do is the minimum. We haven't done what we had to do. Our point of view, our aspect is, first of all, after a disaster as Daniel, there were some results, such as that the private and public sector should collaborate, should bounce. For the private sector, it was a very great challenge. We didn't have to face, we didn't have to address such a disaster. We had the earthquakes of 1999. We had some damages, but we didn't have to pay such an amount of compensations. So what we saw is that there was an immediate rebound. The total compensations paid, the first compensations paid were paid in between 48 hours. Why this is important? Because there were units that, for example, they had great problems with the floods, with the water during the Daniel. Imagine a unit with primary products, with instruments, with electricity. Everything was destroyed. So they had to send the products within a month. Otherwise, they will they were going to lose the agreement, the trade agreement. So, in order to restore the damages within some days, of course, it was impossible to restore these damages. You give some money. So it is rational that we have to understand the need of an immediate intervention, because we discuss here, but these people here, there are in an emergency situation. Otherwise, they're going to move to the past. The good thing is that the compensations were given immediately. All the units, all the businesses are back to work, which is a very positive aspect to this situation, in addressing this situation, and it's above the residences and the homes, it's also for the units and the businesses. A second point is that there is a study from the insurance companies in order to eliminate the damages that might occur in a future event. So we collaborate with the Observatory of Athens to make some studies. Of course, we don't know if this phenomenon will occur in this area, but this phenomenon might occur also in Valencia, in Italy. It's extreme weather conditions that we don't know the area exactly. Of course, we are lucky enough, we could say, that the disasters, let's say, were not in an overcrowded population with not a lot of lives. There are models that demonstrate different things. Another thing that we should discuss is that under a disaster there is a great effort for regional measures. Because, okay, we might not have the same phenomenon, the same extreme phenomenon, but we might have some phenomena with middle disasters, and we need regional measures of protection in order to bounce, to set back a probable disaster. And of course, we need global measures to face a disaster as a whole. A third topic is the education training of the population and also the risk management in order to make the necessary investments as far as the unit and the businesses is concerned. And last but not least, that we don't discuss a lot, that insurance companies, through insurance fees, that a small amount of 18 billion of the insurance companies could help to the prevention and the protection of the country in a future disaster, in order for the private insurance companies to participate in the protection. Two last comments. It is necessary to use the data of the current models in order to monitor and to take into consideration the risks in the place, in the area where we live in. Not all the areas are the same. There are areas and regions of high risks and areas and regions with low risks. And this should be translated, let's say, in some actions, for example, to the water management. Same as abroad, for example, there is also a factory change of area abroad in order to prevent disasters. I totally agree with Mr. Lykourentzos that we should do something. A possible solution might be the creation of a fund or a special account, or another solution might be a synergy and a contribution of the private insurance companies where they can, because we cannot do everything we want to, but we cannot cover all the needs. I should say that the insurance market was very pleased by the Prime Minister's declarations as far as the insurance of residences and trucks. Many years we hear the the intention of the government to cooperate the private and the public sector. In Greece, we have a very small contribution, but we are in a high-risk area. We have to act in synergy. Everybody is very useful in this situation, and we have to face all the risks.
Thank you very much, both of you. On the part of the insurances, state or private. And so let's give the floor to Mr. Tzortzis for a first remark, on the part of energy and waste management, of course. So first of all, thank you for having me here today. It's a great opportunity, and it's a circumstance. An event I have been invited to before, but I'm very glad each time. I would like to approach the issue at hand from a different point of view, from the point of view of the lawman, of the lawyer. I come from a family that both my father and grandfather were lawyers, so the notion of justice was one I grew up with. We can't forget, when talking about the climate crisis, the climate change issues, that we also have that aspect, especially when we talk about taking great steps. We do live in interesting times, and especially when it comes to the law science, with data ever changing. We did have problems as a country with the multitude of laws, and now, because the law keeps chasing the events and adapting to that, we produce a plethora of new laws that even for us lawyers is very, very hard to follow. So I would like to stress at this point that because citizens have a need to see the response of the political system, which is what needs to cover the needs for energy. Energy is a right. I remember the first president, Mr. Kapros, saying that a person can live in a polluted environment as long as they can manage it. We cannot live without energy. Oftentimes there are theories that talk of de-development, but we have a certain level of civilization and we cannot function without access to that energy. In that crucial circumstance, despite everything we heard before of our country, how far behind we are, how we lag on everything, I can tell you that I was very touched by an initiative that the Prime Minister took on a personal level in the climate meeting in 2019, when he announced the delignitization in the framework of the Green Deal, which I think is a fundamental approach, a fundamental direction the European Union has chosen to take to reduce emissions to zero by 2050, to reach that net zero. It's a very radical approach to climate change. We go even more dynamically into an approach that I think is on a European level, an innovation, and even more so, a circumstance that I think has gone beyond the European borders or the policies that have dominated in Europe. So in 2019, we started drafting the ESEC, which is essentially what each country does for their own address to climate change and implementation of the Green Deal. So we have the National Plan for Climate and Energy. And according to that, until 28, the lignite units in Megalopoli and Western Macedonia needed to stop functioning. That program has been evolving, has been developing. I was also part of drafting this plan because it's important to have both financial and environmental information, but if we lack the proper tools, which would be the laws in that case, we cannot go anywhere. So we created an intergovernmental committee which drafted a national plan for the delignitization, the master plan as we call it, and according to which the old lignite mines would be put out of practice. And based on restorative justice, we would face the need of these areas to go back to the state before the destructive intervention of human, which resulted in the destruction of entire areas that I call black holes. It's not something that you can imagine very easily. You need to go to these areas to see what is actually going on. However, we saw everything, we examined everything, and we tried to address these needs. And the stake at hand was to keep the young people there, to keep the people there that ended up without any jobs, especially during these last years. Because the truth is that despite the environmental motives, economy is what makes the world go round today. So we need to become independent from fossil fuels. And what we came up with was a fee for all pollutant actions and activities. So many people were left without jobs. And we tried to establish environment-friendly activities to be preferred over pollutant activities. In that case, we went forward, embodying a good practice, really, on a European level. And these practices were given to the Greek state with a special purpose vehicle, Metavasi SA, which is for the management of such areas. So areas that up until now were energy-producing areas are now areas that will possibly be an attraction for employees of the area in order for them to keep their workforce, and because these areas that I mentioned before, Megalopoli, for instance, showed the greatest loss of workforce across the European Union. And the truth is that with the interventions that we have conducted and the Just Transition Fund, you should understand that this transition from fossil fuels, it has a cost, it comes with a cost. This cost, as a central option, as a central choice, the European Union has decided to take it on. Therefore, the lack of resources, the deficit of resources we face is an issue for us to keep living the way we do. So we had a special fund, a Just Transition Fund, as it is called, was created on a European level, and we were able to take a great part of this package to subsidize areas like Megalopoli, that I mentioned before, but also the islands that are on the path of delignitization and of independence of fossil fuels. The main areas are Western Greece, Northern Aegean and Crete. These are the areas, the pilot areas, where we implement special incentives for businesses in sectors like clean energy, like innovation technologies, having to do with agriculture and livestock breeding, and the primary sector in general. These are issues that are under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Agriculture and the Deputy Minister more specifically. It has been developed with the Ministry of Agricultural Development and Food. As you can understand, we have now both the legal and financial tools to do what we need to do. What we need are quality proposals to have a result, to create new jobs. That's what we are for, that we seek. Something that moves me personally. I'm very interested in that. And the truth is that we are at a quite satisfactory level of implementation. And during these last times, we've had several developments as well. For example, the regulatory agency, Authority for Energy, have taken on actions on waste management and water management and have expanded their action. However, the current state of the country is that we are last when it comes to waste management or to water management in Europe. And we take on a daily basis huge fines from the European Court of Justice for the abuse of landfills, because, however, the environmental issues are connected with the energy issues, and we do have the great challenge of using waste for energy reason, which is very important for agriculture as well. We do have the technology now to use waste at the source to cover the needs of farmers, and at the same time to make sure natural resources are not abused, which is a win-win situation. Thank you very much for now. Thank you very much, because I would like to keep that we have taken significant steps when it comes to energy transition in Greece. There's no doubt about that. And to the rather discouraging things that we heard before, that was, on the contrary, a very good remark. Mr. Professor, let's get into our conversation, our audience, everyone that is listening to us, because I think that these are issues that touch upon everyone. However, before we go into that, I would like to reiterate a phrase by Mr. Lykourentzos, who said that we need more diplomacy and less fighting. And so, as a diplomat, I got the bait. And so, thinking of the latest survey of Oxfam on multi-global oligarchy, 1% of the wealthiest people on earth has the 95% of global wealth, and therefore has turned that affluence, that power, into political power, and essentially creates the laws for themselves. And so when in that oligarchy, the greatest energy businesses, in the form they have taken on today and their interests, how are we possibly optimistic that this transition that needs to be done, this tackling of the climate change and all the rest, will be carried out in a timely manner? In the time that Mr. Karamanos mentioned, that are quite strict, quite limited. If any one of you have any remarks, please, you can push the button next to your microphone. Good evening. My name is Giorgos Palamidas. I have been working for 40 years in insurances, so I would like to make a remark and say something to Mr. Lykourentzos and Mr. Kantoros. All these years that I have been working, despite the efforts of the state, they cannot compensate citizens by 100%. Any efforts for climate change is what Mr. Kantoros said, that it was from insurance companies that the citizens got paid. It's a measure that the Prime Minister took for the first time, and where we had bad insurance circumstances, are now interested in getting insured because they might get a fine else how. I would say that you need to speak with insurance companies. And as you mentioned, the financial balances are such that you will never be able to cover everything. So the innovation of the Prime Minister, the initiative of the Prime Minister to include lower income people in that might help to that end, and to the state as well. I would like your opinion on that. Thank you very much for your question. It's to the point, but it's not quite so simple. The commitment of the Prime Minister, which was translated into legislation, into a law, regulated things more when it came to infrastructure, to facilities, to agri-farming equipment and equipment in general. In order for us to regulate the issues of farming, we need to overcome the unfortunate mentality, and I'm being very mild here, that we have in place, a mentality that forces producers to waive insurance and demand compensation by the state. It's not easy to change that, because while we're fighting all these fights, parliamentary control that goes through me and then goes to the Prime Minister, 80% of that is to the encouragement of such mentalities, and no one says, okay, even if we insure everything, who is going to pay for that insurance? If you go to a coffee shop, in order for us to be pleasurable, we promise everything to the farmers. We have questions in the Parliament of compensating and covering all damages, but no one asks, no one says where the resources for such compensations can come. It's a very difficult equation to solve, because of course the first step that the Prime Minister took was very essential for us to realize the value of insurance, and it has taken ground. But especially for the issue of agricultural production, we need to overcome a very negative tradition that comes from generations ago, and it doesn't have to do with political parties. That has taken has been expressed in various ways over the years, and we need to remember that as much as we enhance our legislation, as we enhance our insurance mentality, the more optimistic we can be about the future. Because as you said, let's say that we did have 8.5 billion. Farmers may not follow good agricultural practices. They might think that I have insurance, I don't have to culture anything. Blight, for instance, we have several damages because of that. Why do we have that? Because we spray at an untimely manner. If a farmer does not face any consequences from blight, they will not follow good practices. Just one number, and I'm not talking about the protection cap of agriculture, but in general, the insurance fees to the GDP, which is the indexes, the most favorable index, is 2.6 in Greece and 7% in the European Union, and 2.7 in the European Union. So if we want to face dangers of various facets, as well as the reassurance of the third age, we need to triple the fees that we all pay as insurance fees. If we pay 10, we need to pay 30. It's as simple as that. There's not a money-cutting tree. We cannot have that. So unfortunately, we cannot dive into limitless resources when a natural disaster, an earthquake hits us, for example, and cover all the damages in the production or anywhere else. I think we need to face that very, very fast, because this is where the law comes in, and this is where the obligatory character comes in, because if we see if we need 50 years to go to the level of the Western Europe, we don't have that time. We need to act much more rapid, because in the next disasters, we are going to be looking for resources and we won't be able to find it. So what are we going to do?
My name is Skuras from the Agricultural University. I want to ask you something. I don't think that there is any rational man that goes against the good use of the renewable source of energy to replace the traditional, let's say, source of energy. But you know, sometimes emerge some questions that are connected to the intensity we are going to use these techniques. Let me bring you two examples. In the previous panel, for the livestock was referred a question for the livestock management, for the pasture management. For example, where there pastures? Will there pastures? For example, we have 16,000 of pastures that were given for photovoltaic systems. Another example. Yesterday, Amazon declared its new business. So there are scientific data for the footprint, let's say, of the energy, and there are questions that emerge as far as the effectiveness of these resources. So my question is, what is your point of view about these aspects, about what is said, and if you think that we have to limit on how we are going to move towards this very special direction? I would also love to hear the point of view, Mr. Karamanos, for the loss of agricultural land. Thank you very much for the question. It is a very crucial topic, and it's not only in RAEEY that we are taking care of it, it's also a national issue. It's something that, as I have already said, during the evolution of the independent authority, the development of independent authority, and I came through every single step about the photovoltaic systems that some citizens tried to install without plans, and I think that that emerged some issues that blackened in a certain way this whole image of the renewable resources. This is what you have already said, the lack of the balance, the lack of the measure. We have already taken great steps, but the major problem is the lack of a spatial plan that will that will take into consideration any misuse of the land towards towards an activity that is the only way we have to step in order to face the climate change. Because of the climate change, we are going to need much more energy to achieve the goal of adaptation. We cannot rest our case in the current situation. It is an additional need to cover these new conditions and to be able to adapt. I have a certain proposition which is very close to what we are talking about today. It's more than the discussion of photovoltaic. It's a proposal that has to do with biomethane. It's an action that uses the wastes, especially at the small units. We have a scale loss, let's say. So it is a dominant direction, and we could say that also a dominant political choice, not only in the European but also in a national level. There is a great interest, but we have a great interest. We have 58 nowadays the certifications of producers that has to do with biomethane. Biomethane is cleaner than the biogas. It doesn't have the CO2 content. As far as its burn is concerned, is a more cleaner. It has a short circle of CO2, a short carbon circle. So it is much more efficient as far as the greenhouse emissions is concerned. So the primary content is
να χρησιμοποιηθεί σε περιοχές όπως τώρα, στις περιοχές Δυτικής Μακεδονίας και Μεγαλόπολης που σας ανέφερα νωρίτερα.
Also, the current infrastructure can be used, and it can be a resource of wealth, and not a resource of destruction of the environment, of disaster of the environment. The other thing is the culture that you have already mentioned, that the chances there are, what we have to do is to be able to take advantage of them. As far as what you asked for the installation of renewable source of energy, my answer is easy and vertical. Not the installation of renewable source of energy in pastures, in agricultural parcels, agricultural land. Thanks God, Greece has a very downwards parcels where could be used, and with the right direction, in the right way, as far as the photovoltaic is concerned, with a greater efficiency and without harming the agricultural lands.
Δείτε το κουμπί του κύριου καθηγητή.
Το κουμπί του.
Μία ερώτηση.
Just one question, two remarks, two clarifications. Just not to terrorize people. Mr. Kalidis said that there is a limit of use for pastures. We are obligated not to limit pastures over a percentage, which is very limited, very restricted. So CAP does provide for the non-change of pastures for other usage. Mr. Karamanos also said that the strategic plan does not have the legal instruments. Mr. Lykourentzos said, answered to that. Who is going to pay for that? The CAP has specific resources. So we could either cut the 3% of the basic payment or of the basic aid, or we would have to cut budgets from other measures. In the first revision, we did do that, which was a year ago, and that measure has not yet been implemented. So it's not just about planning, it's also about whether you can implement what you plan. And we do have several issues here. And a question. We saw, you said before about the Green Deal, that it came through the farm-to-the-fork policy. Let's say that Europe has achieved the zero emission by 2050. If the rest of the world is not there, what is the gain I get from that? What do I gain? Thank you about this question, because you touch upon a very sensitive issue of this entire approach of the European Union. The truth is that we are faced with a global challenge, and Europe in that challenge has chosen to respond immediately, as well, just like Greece has chosen to respond immediately. You touched upon a very crucial issue because it has to do with the support that anyone, any individual needs to have if they choose that direction. We don't have magical solutions. All that means money. All that translates into a new approach that will make Europe competitive again. I would personally say, it's just my personal opinion, that the Draghi report that has put this approach on a new aspect will be the basis upon which Europe will build in the next program period. I don't think we're going to have to take steps back. I think we're going to move forward even faster. And I think that we need to teach our example when it comes to natural resources. When I mentioned justice, I could not exclude from that developing countries, the south of Europe, areas that are contributing more with their greenhouse gases emissions, however, have the least opportunities to manage all that. Europe does have a responsibility. They cannot shed that responsibility like big countries that produce a huge amount of greenhouse emissions. The paying pollutant needs to pay and cover the damages to the environment and have a financial counter-incentive to stop doing it. The only way forward, I think, is to go even faster, not to take steps back. You can hear me, I guess? Okay, so I just wanted to ask, can you explain, these last years we have been moving in the European Union in the rhythms of agri-photovoltaics, which in theory and maybe in practice too, have a double land use for energy and production. And there's a relevant example, I think. A few days back there was a conference about that. We do move on that rhythm. Do you think we could do that in a better way than the one we followed for photovoltaic? Or it's just a very promising situation without actually things being given? I would just like to answer very, very shortly. I don't see a dilemma here. I don't think we need to choose between two poles. Of course, the priority is what Mr. Karamanos said, but we always have solutions, and technology does give us that opportunity now. We have crops that can be cultivated under the photovoltaic panels. Obviously, we won't prioritize solar panels. And as we have mentioned that we have other options like that of biomethane, we do not need to exclude the main, to my mind, use of the land, but we need to focus on synergistic solutions, not in exclusive solutions.
Yeah, I'm Sagi from Israel. Mr. Andreas, I was very impressed by the numbers that you gave as a compensation for insurance damages in agriculture. The question I have for you as an insurance man, what about prevention? Namely, how much are we going to spend to prevent a huge amount of damages and compensation, namely to encourage, for example, practical research on development on drought resistance plants, on heat resistant plants, on heat resistant animals, so that the number of compensations may be decreased and it will be for the benefit of everybody. Now, this is a chicken and egg. You are an insurance company and you are trained to pay damages, but the question, who is going to prevent the increase of damages? And I think that there is a role here for new companies that have practical solutions, and we have to think how we can support and grow those companies, and the bottom line will be less expenses. And I would like to hear your opinion about it.
Lykourentzos για το prevention και ο κύριος Καραμάνος νομίζω.
Thank you for your question. I will be very, very brief. There are many ways, many measures that we can take and that are implemented and are financed, whether by the European Commission in the CAP, in the framework of the CAP, or by the ELGA, like the Greek anti-hail program, let's say, which is implemented only by drones at the moment, that spray nitrates, iodic compounds, and mitigate the damages from hail, and cost approximately 20 million in the organization. We also have a new published tender declaration open until the 20th of December about a program amounting to 63 million euros for the next 5 years, aiming to have hail being weakened and not destroying the production as much. Other programs that are being financed are the two programs: the development of networks for hail protection that are the responsibility of the producers to install and are financed up to an 80% for individual producers and 100% for groups of producers and cooperatives. The participation we've had so far is not very satisfactory so far, despite the incentives, the financial incentives being quite high, because they avoid any technical or bureaucratic responsibilities that are quite significant, I might add. The second program within those finance programs is the development of wind mixes, which are essentially windmills that function according to the Meteorological Agency indications until a time where frost comes in and they have the opportunity to increase their temperature by 2 or 3 degrees and therefore mitigate the frost. These programs are similarly financed, 80% for individuals, 100% for groups. And during the 5 years that I have been the president of the organizations, despite all this, the talks we've had, nobody applied for that program. So we've had some capabilities that have not yet been utilized. That's when it comes to production.
Not the hail part, which is not my business, but agriculture, namely better plants that can resist the heat increase or they can need less water, etc. This is the other side of the equation, but the result is the same: more food, less money, less compensation.
I think this is what will. I think that this is what Professor Karamanos will address right now.
Η απάντησή μου στην ερώτηση.
My answer to this question is more general, I could say. I would like to tell something, since we are talking about prevention. The HBO study that touched all the sectors of the Greek finance prevented that the total cost was 500 to 2 billion trillion of euros. This cost is diminished by 200 billion of euros. For the private sector, I don't have specific data, but all these measures of adaptation included this one that you referred to. All these measures mean cost. This 2,000 billion that we save is after the adaptation of the cost we make to take all the necessary measures. So what matters is that the budget between damage and income and profit and gain is very important. But we have to take any necessary action, and this action means cost. Hello, my name is Angelos Moraitis. Please be brief. We are closing the session. I would like to ask Mr. Karamanos and Mr. Tzortzis. Mr. Karamanos, at a previous panel, somebody said about the transition issue, the green transition issue, for example, the paper straws, that when we try to drink from these paper straws, the paper is distracted when the coffee, for example, is hot. But I have two examples. For example, previous years, when we have the fires, that the smoke arrived up to Malta, what a great environmental disaster was that, and how it influenced the increase of CO2, and how much money, how many billion we could save if the government had taken the necessary measures before the disaster. And some months after that, there were declarations for the installation of photovoltaic installations. So I would like to ask how important, I would like a remark on how important are the fires, and Greece has this kind of problems every summer, every year. I am going to ask you about, to answer you about the fires. For me, the greatest issue as far as the forest fires is concerned is the prevention. It's not
Υπάρχουν τρόποι να προλάβουμε πάρα πολύ.
It's not putting the fires out, it's the prevention we can take for not the fires not to appear. So the forest manipulation has been banned for years in Greece after the destruction of the forest service. So this service helped, let's say, as far as this situation of the fires every year is concerned. And now we have only the fire zones. So now we take no prevention as far as the fires is concerned. For this kind of prevention, scientists by the academia have been synerged in order to prevent the fires and have proposed many measures. The thing is, the very crucial question of prevention and collaboration between sectors. Can I make a remark? I will be very brief and close to what you have already said. We have to keep in mind that when we have a problem, there is also the solution. What Mr. Karamanos said is that there's a problem with the microphone. So, what Mr. Karamanos said is that there are materials that can be used for our bioeconomy. I mean, the materials that can be burned and instead can be used for the bioeconomy. There is a better
έλεγα νωρίτερα. Δηλαδή κερδίζει δύο φορές.
There's a better utilize of the methane for the burning material. So the prevention is the secret. What you said before about the installation of renewable source of energy to areas where there were fires, this is not true. I can guarantee that and also there are studies that certify that in these areas no kind of these activities can take place. There is misunderstanding around this issue and lack of information. We have to finish at some point.
Θα ήθελα απλά και μόνο, επειδή έπρεπε ουσιαστικά να έχουμε κλείσει στις 6 ακριβώς.
We had already finished, but I would like to ask Mr. Kantoros. In the previous panels, was many times said that in Greece we need to change our mentality. As far as the insurance topic, apart from the the gap that exists of how many people are insured. What makes me think is that in France, in Spain, in Netherlands, there are many insurance companies that insure the agricultural sector and the primary production. Here in Greece, apart from a discussion we had in 2020, it was an off-the-record discussion with ex-Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Vadis, that was open to start to open this debate, this dialogue, and that the insurance company should also take into consideration the primary sector as well. So my question is that why in Greece there is no intention by the insurance companies to bring such programs that are verticals as far as the sector? Yes, we have to close the section, so I'll be brief. There is the intention by some companies that already have a European experience as far as this issue is concerned. But we have before to make studies in order to create synergies, because there are no many programs and systems. So these systems in Europe are hybrids. So it is the private sector which is actually supported aid by the public sector. Moreover, with the 4% of ELGA, without any synergy, we have no hope. We cannot find insurance fees, who is going to pay. So to create a parallel system is out of the blue. There is no point on that. There are examples in Europe, of course, and of course there are insurance companies that have the intention to bring all the knowledge in Greece. But we need to take further action. Another remark, that the dialogue has been taking place in 5 years now. But we haven't managed to reach the submission of programs. And this is an open issue. This is both parts are not positive or negative. They are participating in a dialogue. Professor Vitos told me that I have to close this session. I have to remember that this panel's topic was the climate, environmental challenges and risks as far as the climate crisis and European agriculture is concerned. What we have heard is that based on what we have heard is that probably I'm influenced by what I have already heard, that the most crucial problem is the fact that we cannot attract young people in the agricultural sector. And to me, this is the most important issue. We need a strategy in order to attract young people, and maybe this is the vehicle for the mitigation of our demographical problems. I think that the family in the rural areas want to have more children, and on the other hand, for the urban families, it's more difficult to have many children, because life in the cities, as we have already said in previous panels, children is a burden, probably is a burden for the urban family, and it's very difficult to have many. So I would like to thank all the participants, all the delegates, all the speakers. This is an issue that we're going to face in the future continuously. Thank you very much.